You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network. This is the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunderquack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunderquack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of thunderquack.com, which you can get every other Tuesday over at patreon.com/thunderquack, just like our Patreon producers, Brian Morowski and JJ Samuel do. Or, you can be lame and you can get it late every Friday on podcast services across the galaxy. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Conkin.
I got to get that.
We're here to
I
talk
got to
about-
get into the rhythm of that every other, because I used to say every Tuesday, right? Like you get it early
Tuesday.
every
Oh,
Tuesday,
it's not
or
every Tuesday,
wait,
yeah.
but it's not every Tuesday, right? Because like, although there's other stuff that goes into the feed sometimes, like last week we did What If season 1, but sometimes it's the exclusive episode, like it will be next week, right? So like that's just an off week. There's just nothing there. So it's the Thunderquack podcast is every other Tuesday. So I gotta. It's really hard when
I just thought you gave the other ones as well early Tuesday, but I guess it's like always, you never really know what's going to happen every other Tuesday.
They do get, so when there's like an episode of Nuff Said, or if I do one of the other shows, that does happen. They do get it early on Tuesday, and then everybody else gets it on Friday for general release. But on the weeks where I do off the record is only for Patreon supporters at $5 and above, right? It replaced the ad-free version of the podcast. So on those weeks, if you're just a podcast subscriber, if you're just subscribed to the feed, you just get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir. Right?
Good day.
Should I call out what that's a reference to, or just let people who know feel superior? I'll do that.
Good day, sir. I said good day. Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, now I forget what it is.
Oh, do you forget? Okay. Do you need to know? Is it going to bother you?
It's going to bother me because I can say, I'm saying it in my head. Wait, is it Fez? Who says it?
Okay. You put me in a tough spot. Yes, you are correct.
Okay.
You're referencing that 70s show?
Yeah.
Yeah. He does definitely say good day, sir, a lot. Like good day, sir. I said good day, sir.
Yeah.
He's referencing Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh.
Yeah, he's referencing Gene
I definitely
Wilder.
know it from that 70s show and not at all from Willy Wonka.
Have you never watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory?
Of course I've seen. I played Willy Wonka in a community theater production.
You played Willy Wonka.
I played Willy Wonka. I have pictures of me with a hat on.
I would have turned that role down.
Why?
Because there's no comparing. There are just some roles that you just can't take.
I was quite pleased that I got that role. It was very cool.
How old were you?
Very cool play. Like less than 15. Maybe 15. 15 or younger. I was tall.
When we did Faulty Towers, were you? That was That was before.
That was the year before I came. You guys did so many cool things the year before I came. You did Rocky Horror and you did Faulty Towers, I think.
Wow.
And then I came the year after.
Oh, yeah, I guess that was 11th grade. Yeah, when we did Faulty Towers, all of the other guys were like, "Oh, I want to play Basil. I want to play Basil. I want to play Basil." Right? Everybody wanted to play Basil, and I was like, I specifically made the decision of like, I know that I'm not gonna do. I can't do justice to John Cleese, and nobody else did. Nobody else who played Basil Fawlty in that production, because I think there were 3 Basils, because that's how we did things back then. So like different nights, different people would play him. Or maybe we switched partway through the show. It was a long show. It was like a 3-hour show because it was dinner theater. It was a whole thing. God, I miss that stuff. So good. I specifically made the decision of like, I don't want any of the lead characters. And I went to the audition because it was the first time that Ms. Rutherford ever like held auditions. Usually she just cast. Usually
Yeah,
she
yeah,
just
yeah.
told you who you were,
Yeah.
right? And she
Yeah.
held auditions, and I was like, I went in and I was like, I sat down during the auditions because I went with others that like friends from acting class, from drama class, to support them, and I sat down next to her and was like, I'm not going to audition for anything. I don't it's not that I don't want to get up and audition. If you want me to audition for something, I'll audition. It wasn't like an arrogance thing. It was like, I was just like, I will play whatever bit parts, like, and I'll play like 3 characters, which is what I ended up doing. I played like 3 different characters throughout the show, costume changes and everything, because I was like, because I'll have a way better time and I'll be way happier with myself doing that than I would sucking at the lead, right? I because I was like, I think like I because I could do it as well as anybody else who's auditioning, but I don't want to like, and also we had just done oh man, what's it called, the best Christmas pageant ever, is like, that's the title of
No,
the show.
because we did that one the year that I was there. Unless you did it 2 years in a row, or
No,
unless
we
she did it the
didn't.
year after you left, and we did I just remember doing the best Christmas pageant ever.
You guys might have done it the year after, like the
We
next
might have
year,
done it
because
because then she would have skipped a year. That makes sense.
we did,
That makes
because
sense.
we definitely did it before Faulty Towers, because that was one of the things, is that I was the brother in that. So it was like the 2 leads in that are both girls, but the like top build boy role was my role. So like I had a lot of lines, and it was a lot of work, and I loved it. It was great. And I had to sing bad, which was awesome. I
Nice,
but
nice.
really hard, because um it was so the choice that I made was that the character, I can't remember his name, but he couldn't, like any, like boy of that age, like his like voice was cracking and he couldn't carry a tune. So I was like, so I was doing stuff where like my voice would go way up in pitch back when I could actually do that, and it's just like the last remnants of being able to do it. And I had to, like, I did it the first rehearsal that we did, and Miss Rutherford was like, you can do that, but you're gonna have to, like, you gotta belt it, like, because when you go high pitch, it's really hard to project at that high pitch for it to
Yeah,
still be like
yeah.
legible words. You can make sound, but because it's like, it's like an introduction moment, like it's the first moment that character has on stage. So it's like, what he's saying is also important, not just the fact that I was going for a laugh with the bad singing. She was like, it's fine, you can do that, but if you do that, like the tech booth has to be able to understand you. And
Right,
I was
yeah.
like, okay, cool, challenge accepted. So it was like stuff like that, and it was that one was a lot of work, and so it was like, coming off of that one, I was like, I don't want to be, I definitely don't want to go from that to Basil Fawlty, who like has to carry the whole show, right?
Right, yeah.
That
Who
is
was
so much work. Um,
who was Basil?
Josh was one of them. I
Andrew Newton?
I want to say Andrew Knudsen played Basil as well.
Yeah. Look at that shout out to Penticton peeps.
Yeah, and then one
I
other. I think
forget that
there's
this
one
is a
other, but
podcast that people have to listen to, and it's not just me and Mike talking about
they
our
love it.
lives
They love it. You
to each
guys
other.
love it.
I hope this is okay.
They
We actually are talking about really cool things today, so
we
I
are
feel
going to.
like
Yeah. Don't worry. We're
gonna
just going to
start
talk
with you
about
have
Dune
to
for the
listen
rest of the
to our
episode.
life. Oh my
But
gosh.
but this is the thing is that like you get like every episode is somebody's first episode, right? You always have to remember that.
And then you have to deal with Mike and I talking about our high school
But it's
drama.
really important that people who are tuning in for the first time realize this is not a review show. We did that. We did that for 8 years and we were not serious, but like we had a format and we followed it and like we were very critical and it was not fun towards the end. And this
That is,
show is fun. We do this because we like to do this.
I do this because Mike sets it up and I just show up. That's why I
Yeah.
do this. And I get to talk
Yeah.
to you about
Are you saying
random
that you
things from high school.
once again Amanda is saying she doesn't actually like to do this, but I
did not say anything. I'm
yeah.
sitting here. You should. It's really funny though if people knew how I was like. I'm here. I'm just like I'm totally here.
But
I'm
you're
not
like one of the
on
only people
Instagram.
that I can talk to about this that knows what I'm talking about.
I know.
Right?
It's really weird. I feel like I've talked about this on the podcast before too. But like if I ever woke up as a teenager,
Mhm.
which would just be the most terrifying thing ever, because who
Like
wants to
a
like
time
be,
travel
like,
situation.
teenage, like a time travel situation.
Yeah.
Mike is like the only person that I feel like I could go because I've know you from then, and everybody else I feel like I like know enough people. Maybe I could. Me and my sister were not close when I was in high school, but I don't know, Mike.
Well, but
Because I
you
do
also
feel
need
like
to we have talked about this on multiple occasions. You have to have somebody that you can go to like Marty goes to Doc Brown where he knows it's going to take a second and I have to convince him. But I know that I
but he'll
will be
believe
able to
me.
convince him that
Yeah.
this is what's happening. Right? Yeah.
You're the only person that would believe me.
Yeah.
And because it would be I don't know. But here's the weird thing though.
Yeah.
Is that I know a lot of who you are now. I actually don't know what I would say to like be like, I know you really well, but I know nothing about 15-year-old Mike.
I think you would be surprised the things that I've told you now about the way that I was feeling about things then that like I would not have told anybody. So it would be really easy for you to if you're writing the screenplay of this, a moment would come where you would be we would be in the room together and something would be happening and you would be like you would know like whatever. I don't know what the circumstances would be. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but like there would be a circumstance where it's like something would happen and you would know that that's a moment where like I was like nervous or insecure or something like that, or
Right.
I did something dumb.
Like,
and it's like, and you would know why I did the dumb thing or why I was really mean to someone, which is probably because of my insecurities and something that at that time I didn't realize. I just thought I was really smart. It's the Liz Lemon thing, you know, like she remembers back to high school and it's like she remembers everybody being really mean to her and then she talks to people and they're like, no, actually like it happened a different way. And it was actually that she was the super mean one. And it's like, oh,
that's
I have those
definitely
moments
a show
every
that
once
I
in a while.
also haven't seen. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that we didn't open by talking about what happened on set of Rust. I realized too, we're like we should have done that in the post show. Just because we brought ourselves there naturally talking about
because Alec Baldwin is
Alec Baldwin is
yeah.
involved in it. But I feel like
I'm gonna leave this one to you. You have, I think, not necessarily more to say, but I think that what you have to say is much more relevant than anything that I would say. So
well, I just think that it's worth acknowledging. I mean, I imagine that the listeners of this particular podcast have already been confronted with it in social media and in the news. But just there was a loaded gun on a set it was supposed to be a prop gun and it was handed to the actor and then it was discharged by the actor who thought that they were holding a prop gun and it wound up killing the DP. Helena Hutchins, and I have never said that out loud before, so I really hope that I'm pronouncing it right. Just been reading it a lot. And then it also injured the director because the bullet went right through her shoulder. And it's super upsetting, especially we were talking, I think, on the last podcast about the IATSE strike that was happening, or the bargaining agreement that they were trying to reach. And it's just such a timely conversation because for me, I literally, I did a post about this, but for me, whenever I'm on set, I'm so anxious. And it was just this year that somebody asked me to try to articulate what it was. Like, why am I always so anxious? Because I produce animation all the time and I'm not anxious, right? Why am I so anxious when I'm doing live action? And it's because I take the full weight of that as a producer on set, that anything that goes wrong on set is my responsibility ultimately. And for me, somebody was like, why? And I'm like, well, because somebody could die. Like, there's just so many things that can happen on a set that if you're not doing it safely, or if there's just mistakes happen. And there's so many different stages that we have to try to keep people accountable and try to keep things safe. And at any one point in time, one of those could fail, and you hope that you have the fail safes in place so that other people might catch it. And just learning more about what happened, you realize that there was a lot of flags that went unheeded, and the mistakes that could have prevented this tragedy were not addressed or listened to. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking. So anyways, if you are looking for anything that you can do to sort of be more aware of this, I will say there's a lot of negotiations within IATSE themselves for like crew conditions and safety and all that jazz. So you can pay attention to that. But also, I found AFI is the American Film Institute. It's a place that she went to school, and they set up a scholarship fund in her name, which I think is really, really awesome. So just because it's a thing to just be able to encourage female cinematographers. It's one of the most underrepresented on set roles for females, and I think it's just really great for them. And it just gave me something, like an outlet for me to put something towards and try to find some light in this tragedy. But anyways, I just wanted to sort of address that because, again, we got there, and this is it's a pop culture podcast, and we talk about things that are relevant. And I think that it's really relevant to know that there are real people making the things that we watch, and that sometimes their safety is not necessarily heeded, and that is very sad and unfortunate, and it can lead to death.
I think one of the most interesting things, so a few points. First, I read a really great thread. I wish I still had it, or I had noted the person on Twitter that wrote this thread. But it was the person who handles firearms on set is called an armorer, and so this guy, he wrote this incredible thread, so detailed about that job, about that role on set, and that role isn't to make sure that the director is getting what they want, like the shots that they want. That's not your job as the armorer on a set. Your job is as like basically the warden of safety with those firearms, right? And that real guns are used, and they're used for a variety of different reasons, but that if you're doing your job properly, there is no one point of failure that leads to something like what happened on the set of Rust to happen. Like there are multiple points where those safety protocols have to fail in order to even get to the possibility of that happening. So like sort of his perspective on it was like it didn't need to happen, obviously, and
yeah, I mean, if you've ever worked with I mean, there are really good, like, and gun laws are different in Canada, and we have props masters that need to be certified, and it's a huge deal to be certified to be able to use weapon, like to be an armorer in Canada. I don't even know if it's called an armorer, but basically like a certified prop master that can deal with the guns, and it's
intense, right? Like that stuff is locked up. It is only touched by the actors. It is never given to random people. There's just there's a lot of protocols and a lot of things
Yeah.
on set, and you listen. Like that's the one thing that I will say for me, at least personally, like when I have first ADs on set, like if there is anybody, like we try not to raise our voices and we try not to yell at people, but the only person who is always excused, in my opinion, from yelling at somebody on a set is it somebody that has to deal with the guns. If there's anybody
Yeah.
that is treating a gun unsafely, like that is just,
Yeah.
I think the be all end all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the reports that I read today on Twitter, as sort of details start to come out about this, is that apparently in between setups there were individuals who were going and basically shooting cans with the guns, and like that's exactly what led to the situation. And it's just,
There
yeah, like
shouldn't be any active guns. Like that's
it
just
the
yeah.
the point that was made on that tweet, I don't know who tweeted that information that they were, you know, shooting cans in between takes or like in between setups and whatever, but the tweet that was, because it was like a retweet, and the tweet that was on, like sort of making the point about that was like, this is what happens when people treat sets like or film shoots like fun, like parties, and not like work, not like a workplace with the same sort of etiquette and the same sort of protocol that you would take into your office job or whatever, right? And I thought that was really interesting, that like that, and because that is definitely a perspective that I've encountered. It was definitely something that I wrestled with in film school, which is that like we'd be out there doing stuff and you'd have like half of the class or your group or whatever that would be out there to like hey, like we're shooting a project, like let's get this done and like go do something else, right? Like we wrap this and then we can go like have a drink, or you know, I wasn't legally old enough to, but it's okay, I went into the bar with them anyways. But I you know, like it's like let's get the job done, let's get our stuff filmed, and then we'll go get something to eat, or we'll go hang out, or we'll go to a movie, or just, you know, we'll do like hang out, do whatever. And then there would be the other half of the class that thought that like it was time to sort of like goof off, and it's like, oh, we got the cameras, let's film some stupid stuff, let's and sometimes they turned those into their projects and made basically jackass videos. There were in my first year there were a couple of individuals who, like, that's specifically why they were going to film school, so that they want, like, that's what they liked, the jackass movies and like CKY and stuff like that, where they're like, they just wanted to learn how to work the cameras so that they could make videos of people jumping off of roofs. Um, and it always pissed me off. I hated it because I was like, first off, like, this equipment doesn't belong to us; it belongs to the school. And if it breaks, we're all screwed, and I can't afford to pay for it. So don't screw around with the equipment. And then also, like this is not, like, what you're doing is specifically not safe. That's the point of what you're doing. And it always bothered me. And so, you know, I always got the reputation as being no fun. I was like, you know, I really don't care. You know, and you
I'm no
know me.
fun.
I don't care
Yeah.
if idiots think that I'm a jerk. Yes, I am a jerk to you. I'm very nice to other people. Um, but yeah, that attitude is just something that's always really bugged me, and I don't know that I ever really articulated it well back then, because I was 18, 19 years old. But nowadays, it is very similar to what you say of, like, you know, like, it's your responsibility, safety, and, you know, like, somebody could die. That's and guns don't necessarily even have to be involved, right?
Yeah,
Like,
no, and I mean, there's just so many, like, the amount of things I remember. I just love this because there's a reason why I do it, but I definitely had a DP look at me with, like, just because I glared at her
mhm.
because she had just her socks on and was stepping across an open staircase to a ledge on the other side with her socks on to try to see if she could get a shot from there. And I was just like staring, and she's like, it's okay, I got this. And I'm like, I don't care that you could so easily slip and fall down this flight of
Yeah.
stairs right now. Like, it's not about you think, I know, it's not like I think you're a toddler. I'm not like thinking that you don't know how to walk, or that it's that literally what you're doing is unsafe. I don't care if you've done it a million times. If you slip and fall right now, I let you do this. I let this happen. I was watching you do it. That's I know that you're an adult and you can take responsibility, but on a film set, like, some of that becomes the, like, who's actually there, and you listen to your first ADs. And that's the thing that's the most heartbreaking for me, because the first AD is such a it says everything about it. Like, I think that that's the most important role. And I mean, I'm not a creative, I'm a producer, right? And so obviously there
Yeah.
are a lot of really important creative people. But for me, as a producer, especially on indie projects, the most important role is the first AD, because it sets the tone for absolutely everything else.
I
And
think
it
anybody
and
who's ever
it's
been
you're
on
safe.
an actual set,
Yeah.
I think anybody
Yeah.
who's been on a real set for a serious project would agree that the first
Yeah.
AD is the most important person. And the first AD, like, when the first AD talks, everybody shuts up and listens, because
Yeah.
it,
And
like,
they do the safety things in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, they're in charge of people's safety, right? And they, like, the fact that that first AD, from what I can hear from the reports, is that that's the person that handed the gun off. Like, that for me is just like that breaks my heart, because they know,
Yeah.
if they don't follow the protocols. And that's the thing too, like, producers can do whatever they want. But if you find a producer that's just like, oh, I'm a producer, I can do whatever I want, it's like, you're not doing your job, because the
Yeah.
reason that systems are in place is so that they prevent accidents, right? And you're not always there, and that's not your job. So even if you are the producer, you shouldn't get a pass. And that's the same, in my opinion, with, like, first ADs. It's
Yeah. I think it's so interesting that this happened. I mean, it's just a coincidence, but last week Ruby Rose had her tirade
Yeah.
on social media about the conditions on the Batgirl, a Batwoman set. Sorry, there was Batgirl news today. I am
Yes,
totally
we'll
not
talk about
meaning
the
to
Batgirl
demean the
news.
character of Batwoman,
No.
but there was very big, very awesome, very exciting Batgirl news. We'll talk about that right after this, and then transition into Dune. But I she sort of like made all of these accusations and stuff. So I said immediately when it happened, I'm going to check with some people, and I did check with a couple of people who I know have worked on CW shows, and specifically who've worked on Batwoman. And it was really interesting that it's like, she had that whole thing she posted to Instagram or whatever. I think it was Instagram. And and it went wide. It got picked up and went wide and became the news for that 24-hour news cycle in entertainment, about, how horrible it was on set, and all of these things, and how bad it was, and that's why she left the show. And when somebody whistle blows and that sort of thing, it's like, we absolutely have to hear them out, and we have to take what they say at face value, until such time as, like, everybody else from the production steps up and goes, that's actually not what happened. So, and also, I will also say in this, both things can be true.
Right?
The
There
producers,
can be a lot of unsafe stuff, and a lot
yeah,
of things that
and
are
and
problems.
yeah, stuff did happen on the set of Batwoman. And I was it, I think it was a producer was injured pretty seriously and left
Oh,
paralyzed.
that I think it was, no, it was a PA
Was it a
that
PA? Okay.
underneath it was a PA that was paralyzed
Okay.
under a lift. A
Yeah.
couple days before COVID, like 2 days before they shut it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that could absolutely have been like a result of, like, hey, they're about to shut us down, we got to get some of this stuff finished, and rushing, and cutting corners and stuff like that. Like, who knows? Like, I'm totally willing to hear that part of it. But I think that it has worked in Ruby Rose's favor that this news happened immediately after, because the story was starting to turn on her, where a lot of people were coming out and going, actually, like that other stuff aside, the reason why Ruby Rose is not Batwoman anymore is because she was fired. Like, no, like she was awful on set. There were multiple formal complaints about it. Like it's like she was apparently like a real like dictator, like kind of came in with this attitude of like, I've made movies, I'm in John Wick, right? Like that sort of an attitude of like, oh, I've worked on the biggest action franchise ever with Keanu Reeves, and I know how it's actually done, and this isn't how it's done. And and like I said, like I confirmed with some people, like the people that I know pretty well, that I've known most of my life, that have no real reason to lie about this. Like they and I'm not saying any names because I'm not gonna. I guess the technical term would be reveal sources, but I wouldn't want to put anybody's career in jeopardy in talking about this, but I definitely like two different people that were like, oh, she was not good to work with. She was a real problem from like day one. So when other people started posting on social media of like, that's not how everybody else quite remembers it, it was like, okay, this is interesting. And then this happened. The accident on the set of Rust happened, and it was like no one's talking about Batwoman, and it's like, and it just like disappeared from the news cycle. And I think it probably would have drawn itself out for the rest of the week, had that not been the case. Which I always think is like a really interesting thing, because at the end of the day, both stories are kind of about the same thing, and both kind of like timely in the sense of like you said, the IATSE strike and these conversations about working conditions on sets, and this attitude that, 18 to 20-hour work days are like that. Hey, that just comes with the territory. If you don't like it, don't work in film. And it's like, actually, no, like everybody is entitled, no matter what industry they're in, to a safe workplace. That's just
Yeah.
that's how we do stuff in North America, and many other parts of the world. And maybe it's not how it works everywhere, but I think that we can agree that based on our ideals, in this part of the world, that's how it should work. Is that people should, be entitled to a safe working environment, and working for 18 to 20 hours a day, and then having to drive 50 miles back to uh, your hotel in a completely different like city, is not, when production could put you up somewhere closer by. That because people, that's one of the things that I think people don't realize with a lot of film shoots. It's one of the things that Tom Welling, actually, I mean, he didn't fight for it. The rest of the cast of Smallville fought for him to get a driver and change the way that the
Oh, right.
CW
Yeah.
would do things. Michael Rosenbaum talks about this a lot on his podcast, about like when he had Tom Welling on. But also, like, every time somebody from Smallville came on, it would kind of come up, this thing of like Tom was working, because he's in every scene. It's Smallville, so Superman show. He's Superman. He's in every scene, right?
Yeah.
Very very few moments in that show that he's not in, and so other people will be coming in and out, and wrapping earlier in the day or starting their day later or whatever, working 12 hours, and he would be there for 20, and then he would get in his car and he would drive back to his apartment, and to go sleep for 4 hours, and then get back up and come back out the next day, drive all the way out to Langley to shoot at the Kent farm,
Yeah.
right? Like
Ridiculous.
all
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
out to Fort Langley, which like it's a lot of driving, and they fought for like, hey, I like, he's the lead of our show, he's gonna end up in a ditch. Which, there's a bit of irony in that, because that's how the whole series starts. But not it's not a ditch, it's a river,
Jeez.
but I
Same.
but
Same. 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 Same.
yeah, same. But like Michael Rosenbaum was like, no, like this needs to happen. Like for Tom more than anybody, but like sort of for everyone. And so the CW kind of changed a lot of the way that they did stuff. Because the
I mean,
CW is kind of
not
known
too
for
pervasively, because
not
KJ
no
Apa got into a car accident on
yeah
Riverdale, right? For similar reasons, where it was just like super late and they have
yeah
to drive themselves, and it's just, yeah, I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, it's one of those things where I think if you don't keep fighting for it, eventually, like
Yeah,
productions are businesses, and they're gonna keep the costs down however they can, right?
yeah.
Um, and it's just like any business, right? It's I posted on Twitter the other day that because I'm getting kind of sick of all the boycotts of everything, especially because one of the big ones right now is Mr. Christie, the snack company.
Oh well, that's because they're striking.
Yeah, no. I like and I'm boycotting. But the
Hmm.
reason why I'm frustrated by it is that when I walk into the grocery store, there are two other brands of cookies to buy, and they have a quarter as like combined, they have a quarter as much of the shelf space as Mr. Christie does with every other product, right?
Right.
Um which is super frustrating because it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Just not buy cookies? Yeah, Mike, you're not supposed to buy cookies. You're a 36-year-old man. Stop acting like you need to have a cookie 3 times a day. You're a grown man. This is why you're 20 pounds heavier than you should be.
Hey,
But
I had
but
that same problem this weekend. I made myself a whole batch of cupcakes, and I'm like,
oh
I'm not going
god.
anywhere. I'm gonna eat all of these cupcakes myself. And then
Thankfully
I
I
saw
came
photos of
yeah.
myself in front of it. It was terrible.
Thankfully I came home on Saturday with a batch of chocolate chip score toffee cookies that my mom made
Oh,
with Cara and Cassie
that
during the
sounds
day.
amazing.
And they're
Oh,
delicious. And so it's not like don't worry guys. I have cookies. Don't worry. I'm fine. And I bought some President's Choice thin mint type things they're all right, but like I miss my Oreos and my Chips Ahoy. But like I'm annoyed with having to boycott in order to support uh uh workers because corporations by their nature are going to do everything they can to minimize the amount of money they spend on their workforce. It's the way that it goes, right? And it's not we shouldn't be they shouldn't have to strike in the first place. We shouldn't have to boycott in order to support a strike because there should be legislation in place
hmm,
to
yeah,
protect people in their workplaces from having to work hours that are too long or for wages that are too low or any of the other myriad labor concerns that people strike for. They shouldn't be problems in 2021. We should have representatives that actually care about our best interests. But instead, we've created a system in North America specifically that protects corporations and takes advantage of people. And the people who are responsible for that are the elected representatives who also happen to run those corporations, right? And yeah, okay, oh, so I don't run the corporation, my son runs the corporation. Yeah, but you're
yeah,
drawing a
yeah.
paycheck. You're being paid $1 million a year, for nothing, for not even doing any work because you are a senator or a congressperson or whatever, and you can't technically work for them, but you do somehow still make money, or your spouse is being employed by the company that your family has owned for generations that is currently in the hands of your son, right? Like we people get away with it, and they're allowed to get away with it because the system is built in favor of them. And it's just like that to me is the thing that really pisses me off, is that like we're supposed to have a democratic representative government both here and in the States. It's you know we have parliamentary democracy up here, and they have a democratic republic down there, and they operate in two very different ways. But regardless, the thing that's the same about them is that we were supposed to elect our representatives to represent our best interests, not to represent the best interests of corporations. And the longer we ignore that fact and boycott things and write petitions on change.org and think that like that's how we're going to do it, it's like that's not what's going to do it. We have to change the laws. That's what has to happen. And movie sets and TV sets being allowed to work people in the way that they are, they're always going to find loopholes. There are lawyers whose entire jobs is like when a new law comes out, it's their whole job to figure out how do we circumvent this law, right? Which to me is like that's
Ugh,
where
you're
lawyers
making
get the
me-
bad reputation. But
You're making me realize that we could just talk about politics and still just call it a Dune podcast, because everything about this, and I'm watching Squid Game as well right now. I'm finally like watching it, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's about capitalism and how terrible
Yeah.
human beings are. Everything, life and art and all of that, imitation, yada yada
Yeah.
yada. But everything that you're describing, I'm like, but how?
it's
This
absolutely what
podcast
Dune is
making me
about. Yeah.
depressed, Mike. It's making me depressed. Where I'm like, we just need a messiah to come.
But that's the problem. That's the problem. Before we talk about sandworms and messiahs, really quick, we did allude to the fact that there was big Batgirl news today that Brendan Fraser has been cast as Firefly in the Batgirl movie. Which I'm just like,
recently was like, Brendan Fraser has the best agent. Just like, yes,
the dude's just we're in the what do we have a name for it?
Renaissance, the Renaissance.
It's like a Renaissance. I don't know. That feels a little clunky. But
Does it?
Whatever.
Come
I don't.
On, that's like a classic. That's classic. That's a classic like phraseology.
No, I know it's that's what I was looking for. Is that? But it's just I feel like you need to get the Fraser in there.
Thanks.
No,
okay.
I just feel like you need to get the Fraser in there somehow.
Okay.
But in any case, Brendan Fraser is having an awesome comeback that if you don't know his story, as like I don't want to, that's a whole episode unto itself.
Didn't we do this episode like a couple episodes ago?
Did we talk? No, it's been we definitely haven't talked about Brendan Fraser in a while, but but he deserves attention and he deserves admiration, and he by all accounts is a wonderful human being, and so I'm very happy for him to be in this Batgirl movie that is apparently happening. The thing with these DC movies is that it's like apparently this is happening. Apparently this is happening, and it's like the Flash is there. Like they've filmed parts of the Flash. We've seen a teaser trailer. We didn't even talk about that. Oh my god, it makes me so mad because it's like I think the story that they've cooked up looks like a very cool story. I just hate Ezra Miller, and I definitely don't like his interpretation of Barry Allen. It's really tragic when we've got Grant Gustin. Well, I'm not watching The Flash anymore because they just have done the same storyline every season for the last, I think they're on season 7 now. But and so I just tapped out. You guys know. We stopped doing Arrow. I tapped out. I tried to keep at it with Legends. The only show that I'm current on is Superman and Lois. And here's the thing about Superman and Lois. It is very pointedly not part of the rest of those shows. And I know, like, I can hear Andy telling me right now, it's no, it is. I mean, Diggle was on it, and it's like, yeah, but Tyler Hoechlin's not going to be on the series finale of Supergirl, and she hasn't even been mentioned by name in Superman and Lois.
Really? Wow,
so it's like, yeah, there was one mention of Crisis at one point, because you well, no, I don't want to spoil anything because people might not have watched it yet. So because it hasn't, I don't know if it's like, Well, I guess in the States it's on HBO Max. So if you haven't watched Superman and Lois, if you've been avoiding it because of the way that we talk about CW shows in general, don't avoid it.
Yeah,
Superman and
the
Lois
reason
is
that people aren't
phenomenal.
watching Superman and Lois is because of our
Yeah.
non-recommendations. I feel like you've got to have a
Well,
million other reasons. But okay, the reason I'm not watching Superman and Lois is because I don't have time and I keep forgetting to record it on
you don't need to
on
record it.
CTV.
You should just be able to stream it on something.
No,
Not
not
yet.
really. Not
I'm
not
sure
in
it'll be on
Canada.
Crave at some point.
It'll be on Crave at some point in time. I'll get
In
it
any case,
eventually. Maybe it's there. Anyways,
they've gone out of their
Christopher
way to
Wood's
be like,
definitely
this
there.
isn't, the other heroes are not going to show up on this. And the only reason that Diggle did is
But
because
they
he
don't
was
need to
directing an
because
episode.
they don't need to
It's
because
it's
it's
fun. Yeah,
Superman and he has his own. Anyways, that's
it's a very good show.
What else? It's good.
Let's
I
talk
would
about
watch
Dune.
Superman alone.
Let's talk about
We
Dune.
can talk about Dune. Are we done? Did we exhaust everything else? I feel
Yeah.
like there was something else that came up in my brain as we were talking, and I was like,
That's
no,
not
anyways.
important.
Okay, this is from the internet. It's a great quote. In a movie, okay, so explain Dune in one sentence. This is like a tweet that came from Dune movie, and this is great. In a move so unsurprising, there's literally an eons-old galactic prophecy about it. Powerful, horny men are unable to peacefully share a planet made of cocaine. I just think that is
Yeah.
absolutely a great tweet. So thank you for that. I don't know. I follow these weird groups on Facebook that just post like images of tweets.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually like read it on Facebook, but it's like August J.
Rather than
followed
being
them
on Twitter.
Rather than being on Twitter and engaging in the conversation there. But anyways, I don't know. Is that an accurate description of Dune?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
There you go.
We went and saw Dune last Thursday on opening night.
Yes.
Together. And we suffered through the pleasurable experience that is Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Yeah, and that's the best way that I can put it.
It's an accurate statement. So this is the context for me.
Yeah.
I have sort of like actively avoided Dune for many years because it was on the periphery and I knew that it was an important piece of pop culture, but I hadn't been drawn to the movies. And I've talked about this many, many times, but I literally like for a long time equated Dune with Tremors because they both take place in the desert and have worms. And so I just had seen Tremors, and that is like the essence that I carried around with me whenever it came to Dune. And I was like, you know what? This movie's coming out. I feel like I should know what's going on with it. I am going to read the book. And I was in the bookstore like 3 weeks ago. And I was like, are you going to get Dune? Do you think you're going to read it? It's like an 800-page book, Amanda. You're not going to read it. And then I impulse bought it at the like last minute. It was like the last thing they did. And then it sat on my shelf for a while. And then a week before, so on the Saturday before the Thursday, I picked it up and I was like, I could do this. I can read this in a week. And I did. And I'm so proud of myself. And here's the thing. I don't understand how I haven't read it previously. And also, it's like so hardcore sci-fi. Like, it's just so awesome that I don't understand how people who haven't read the book understand the movie. Because watching the movie, I'm like, isn't this really boring for everybody that doesn't understand what he's trying to tell us? Because there's the nuance of a book, right? Because they can tell you everything in a book. And he had to just show you. And I think he did a beautiful job of showing a lot of stuff that is and so I'm really curious. That's what I wanted. That's what I've really wanted to talk to you about. And I sent you a link to his breakdown of the Gom Jabbar scene. I don't know if you wound up watching that.
I did. Yeah.
But the thing for me is that like Denis Villeneuve, that's I think how you say his name. That he had such a reverence and a love for the book when he was younger, and that's come through in like all the choices he's made. You can really feel that. And as a lover of Dune for the last 2 weeks, I don't know. I'm really pleased. But I also like I don't know. It's I made a choice to go into that movie now like I read it before instead of after. And I don't know what I just think that that's such an interesting like what the other version of myself, if I had not read the book, what I would have felt about this movie.
Yeah.
So I want to ping you about it because you had watched the other Dune, so you knew what Dune was
Yeah. So
because of the movie.
I know it pop culturally. The spice
Mhm.
must flow. You know, fears the mind killer. You know, like all that stuff. Sandworms, yada yada yada. I know it like many people, whether or not you want to know it, because Dune influenced so much of the sci-fi that came after it, specifically Star Wars. Um, and George Lucas has been like very clear about that. The reason why Tatooine is because of Dune. Um, and I mean like that is the thing about Star Wars, is that people often talk about George Lucas like he's a true original. Um, but what they don't realize about him is that like all of his work is pastiche. It's not like it's not that he's never had an original thought, because he definitely has. But I think that George would be one of the first people to admit that everything he's ever done is fan fiction. Uh,
I love that. Yep.
Star Wars is Flash Gordon fan fiction mixed with Dune and Star Trek and Heinlein and Asimov and Metropolis, and every piece of media, science fiction media that he ever consumed is in Star Wars in some form or another. It is literally a patchwork of all of these things. Dune is a major influence on it, and the crate dragon skeleton that we see in A New Hope as R2 and 3PO are walking through the desert is meant to be a sandworm. Like, that's so when we see the crate dragon in The Mandalorian in season 2, and it is a sandworm for all intents and purposes, right? But with like sort of these other Star Wars isms and crate dragon stuff from 40 years of Star Wars storytelling and other media, all sort of being mixed together. It's like it one of the great things about that sequence in Mandalorian is that it's like it's almost the realization of George's original dream, which was to have this Dune reference in Star Wars, right? And there are so many things like that through all sorts of different. I mean, like Beetlejuice, the the sandworm. Like, there are sandworms in Beetlejuice. They are a direct reference to Dune, right? And it's a completely different context. They're completely different creatures. It's nothing to do with Dune, except for the fact that like the idea of it very much comes from that inspiration point. And there are a bunch of different things from within Dune that wind up in other things. So I think that like we all actually have way more familiarity with it than we realize that we do. That said, I've seen most of the David Lynch one. David Lynch movies are kind of David Lynch in general. I just kind of, it's not my thing. He's just a little bit too high on his own supply, in my opinion. It's like Tim Burton without the fun, and you guys should know that I'm not a huge Tim Burton fan either. It's like Tim Burton movies that are truly depressing, not just kind of mostly depressing like Tim Burton movies are. These guys just needed to be hugged as children. But the majority of my familiarity with Dune comes from the sci-fi miniseries from the late 90s, early 2000s, which I loved. And
So is it because here's the thing, you keep calling it a miniseries,
yeah,
and I saw it as a movie. Like, I found it as a movie. Like, I didn't actually watch it, but I don't see it as a movie as a miniseries. I see it as a 2.5 hour movie when I go
the
to look for it.
the first one is
The one
so
with the dude from Twilight Zone or whatever.
yeah, this is the way that they did those back then,
Probably
is
not
that
what it
it's
is,
like,
but
yeah, the first time that it aired, they would air the whole thing, and then they would break it up into chunks. So you could watch it as a movie, and the Space Channel would do this as well. There where they would like air it as a movie sometimes, like on holidays and stuff. It's like, oh, we're gonna do the Dune marathon thing, and it's like, okay, so we're gonna play all of it, because I think there are two of them, right? That are in that series. But then they would break them up, I think, into 40-minute chunks, and
Oh, okay.
basically play them with commercial breaks as a TV show. So it's like I remember they would do it where it's like, oh, on Sunday night we're gonna, like, it's the premiere of Frank Herbert's Dune, um, and then
Oh, by the
it's
way, I
like,
meant Twin Peaks, not Twilight Zone.
okay, yeah. No, that's the movie. That's the
That's the
David
movie.
Lynch.
Okay, then that's the one I'm talking about.
No, that's not what I watched. So
It's
the
the
Frank Herbert's Dune, I've seen most of that, but Frank Herbert's Dune is like it's a 3-part miniseries. And I think it's three
Gotcha.
40-minute. Oh no, they're an hour and a half each. They would break them up though. Like Space would air these in like 40-minute chunks. So like they would play this over like 2 weeks. They would play like these 3 parts.
Oh, okay.
And there are two of them, because there's Dune and then Children of Dune, um which is like the second half of that story. And uh oh man, who is it that's in it? James McAvoy is in it,
Yeah.
is in the second one, as see, here's the thing, and I tweeted about this. Are there Dune spoilers? How can there be spoilers
See,
for
please,
Dune
there
that's
no,
been
there should be, because I need to read the next book, because I
okay?
can't. I'm like, I don't. So don't spoil things for me. But also, because I've read the because the movie. This is maybe the first thing. Are we going to go into spoilers on this about Dune? Because the movie is just one part of what needs to at least be a 2-part movie, because it
Yeah,
doesn't even get halfway through the book, Dune. And that's the weirdest thing, is because, and somebody was saying, I went with Charlotte, and or no, wait, was it you that said it? No, it was you that said it, that it stops after the second act. Like, it doesn't get to the third act. Like, the resolution
yeah.
doesn't come for what's happening.
It
So I don't know.
stops at the beginning of
It's
the
a weird
second act, right? Like
yes, yeah,
it
yeah,
if in the hero's journey, it stops at him crossing the threshold,
yeah,
right? Like that's the end of Dune Part One, is he crosses the
yeah,
threshold, and then it's like, oh, now the adventure begins. Everything
yeah,
up until that point was all him rejecting the call, like meeting with the god, like all, like so many of these things, like in a classic hero's journey, it's like he's at the point where it's like he's got to meet his mentor and blah 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 and all of this stuff, and it's like it's all of the stuff before Luke even like says, I'm gonna come with you to Alderaan. Right, like there's
well,
nothing
yeah,
left
yeah,
for
yeah.
me
They're
here,
still on
right?
Tatooine.
Yeah, they haven't
Yeah,
left Tatooine yet. They haven't met Han
yeah,
Solo.
yeah.
um so yeah,
Who's
it's
Han Solo in this situation?
oh well, no,
I don't even remember.
I take that back. They just walked into the cantina. They just walked
Yeah,
into the
okay.
cantina, because
Okay.
in this
Okay.
instance, Chani is Han Solo,
Okay.
because she's the one who's gonna take them into this larger world, right? Like, I
I like that you give her that much credit. It's Stilgar. I feel like
sure, okay,
Chani. I hope because it's Zendaya that she does become better than the. I'm really struggling. Okay, so we first of all, before we go forward, we have to
yeah.
decide what kind of spoilers we're giving on this
Okay, we're
podcast.
gonna get into full spoilers in 1 minute. Before we do that, should people go see Dune?
Well, I have seen it twice already, so I am of the mind that yes, it's beautiful. I wish that I
Yeah,
had HBO Max up in Canada. I would watch it every freaking day. I don't have HBO Max. I'm gonna keep going to the theater. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Um, yeah, I think like a lot of movies that come out and are a big deal and are a cultural shift, whether you're gonna like it or not, I think it's worth going to see so that you can be part of the conversation. I am one of those types of people that wants to be a part of the conversation, good or bad, though. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I
if
think that
you
you could
if you
wait and
feel
watch it when
compelled
the
in that
second part
same
comes
way,
out.
Sorry?
Yeah. Like, I feel like if you are a completionist, wait
Yeah.
till the second part comes out so that you can actually watch a complete movie.
I
Because
would say wait until the
if
second
you
one is actually announced because
yeah, yeah, I don't know. It'll be very upsetting if they don't make another one because it's
it
it's half a
I'm
movie.
it had a very good opening. So there were a lot of people who were like, "Oh, Monday morning they'll announce that part 2 is going into production." And they didn't. We have not gotten that news
Yeah.
yet. And I think it's
Yeah.
because WB is waiting to see what week 2 looks like, because we're not talking about like, okay, did the movie have a good opening? It had a good opening. That's it. It
It's
had
if it can
a
sustain itself on HBO and Max and all of that stuff, like a
it's the
hybrid.
HBO Max component, and let's see what week 2 looks like, because week 2 on a movie like this is going to say a lot about whether or not people are going to go see a sequel, because
Right.
word of mouth has gotten out. A lot of people have talked about it, and now we get to see if the wider audience says, okay, yeah, I will check that out now that I've gotten recommendations from friends, or is the fact that it's like weird, esoteric, very, very hard sci-fi, and it's long and it's slow and it's only the first act and a half of a story. Are people actually going to buy into that? Is the general audience going to buy into that? Because I think that, like, I think people like us definitely will enjoy it. I think that people within the sound of our voices will definitely find something to enjoy. Look, the ticket price is worth it alone for Oscar Isaac and Jason Momoa.
Yeah,
Like
Matt
they're
posted retweeted something today that's like, I watched Dune for the plot, and it's like the plot, and it's just like a bunch of pictures of Oscar Isaac.
yeah,
And it's like,
and it's like,
he's naked in the movie. I don't know if people,
yeah.
is that a spoiler? I feel like you could go
No,
for that
because
alone.
don't give any more context than that. But yeah, he is
Okay,
naked in the
I'm
movie.
not.
Not not naked enough.
I mean,
Am I allowed
correct.
to say
He's
that?
not. You are you are allowed, because I was gonna be like, well,
Yeah.
because that's
It
that's the
actually
right
kind of
context. He's not.
is the only part of the movie that pissed me off, which this sounds like I'm being lewd and like I'm making a joke. I mean this in the sense of, like, it goes so hard in every other aspect, and then it pulls back because it's like, well, we can't have a penis. Right? And
I mean, that's fair. Yeah.
it's like you got but you got almost everything else in this, you
Yeah.
know. I don't know, the violence isn't too off the wall. Like, it's actually pretty tame
Yeah,
in terms of that.
I mean, they do sort of blur out a lot of the head chopping. So,
Yeah, it'll get there in the
for the
next
most part.
one. It'll get there in the next
Yeah.
one. It'll get brutal, and it'll get much more violent in part 2, should part 2
Yeah.
happen. Um but yeah, part 1 definitely sort of pulls punches in that, not pulls punches, but definitely doesn't get into that aspect of this world just yet. Um uh but yeah, it was that one place where it was like, it was noticeable in its absence. Let's put it that way. I
It was yeah, I don't know. It was very strategic
It
nudity.
was like Austin Powers. It's and that's always the way that it's gonna be when you have a shot
What?
like that. You know,
I
like in
know,
Austin
yeah.
Powers, when he first wakes up from the cryogenic sleep and he's naked,
Oh,
and
right,
there's
and
like
then
the whole
yeah,
sequence where it's just a bunch of things blocking his junk, as they
yeah.
sort of like move through the scene.
That's a
Um,
classic '90s fare to
yeah,
reference right
a
there.
lot of Austin Powers references lately. I don't like
I don't know. Yeah,
I don't
it's
like
weird.
the idea that we're close to Austin Powers coming back in some fashion. I don't need it.
Yeah, no, that's upsetting.
I don't need it. I don't want it. The
Yeah.
last thing I need is a bunch of people who think they're funny doing Austin Powers references for the next 5 years. God, that was an awful time. It was just like, we just had to tolerate it at a certain point. It's like, yeah, you can do a bad Scottish accent. Congratulations. You can make
Did that
fat
overlap with
bastard
Borat? I
references.
feel like there was some
No, I feel like
Really appears
one
there.
broke way to the next, you know?
To the next.
Yeah. I say go see it. Go see this movie. We're gonna get into full spoilers. We're getting into full spoilers now. Uh,
That-
and I'm gonna start off full spoilers with not really a spoiler, just Stellan Skarsgård steals this movie in his. He's
He is
not
quite
in it that much.
Yeah.
I
He's only got 3 scenes. I think I
Yeah.
sort of like went like because rewatching it a second time made me like really try to like pay attention. But he really like he's in a few things, but he's got like 3 main scenes basically. He's got the sweat one. Oh no, 4. He's got the sweat one. He's got the eating one. He's got the one where he raises out of the chair and is like in his suspenders.
yeah.
And then he's in the bubbles in the goop stuff. Those are like the 4 like iconic things that I remember from
Yeah.
this. And they're also gross. It's great.
Oh, he's
I
so
don't know,
good,
it's
and just like the
really good.
portrayal of the character, the realization of like the grotesque nature of Baron Harkonnen is just like the other incarnations definitely they definitely got it across. They definitely got across that you know the Harkonnens are gross. They're disgusting in not in the sense of like ew yucky, but in the sense of like that is the point of them.
Yeah.
They are corporate greed in excess, right? Like that's what they represent in the story is like just like gluttony and greed and just sort of all of the vices um made manifest in this one disgusting man. And his outer appearance is meant to match that in a certain way. And so like I'm kind of being careful in the way that I talk about it, because this is like, if you remember when we talked about Harry Potter years ago, my biggest issue with the books, and I'm gonna go ahead and say it now. I think I was a little bit ahead of my time. I was picking up on some vibes with J.K. Rowling that I think other people were ignoring. In the way that she like she always made the bad guys in Harry Potter ugly and fat,
Oh,
like
yeah.
and
Yeah.
made a point of it that like, oh, the Dursleys are all fat, right? Oh, they're bad guys because they're fat and they like they're greedy, and you know Dudley's always eating stuff. Hagrid turns him into a pig, right? Like he gives him the pigtail or whatever. And it's like, oh, because he's a gross pig, so he gets a pigtail because fat people are gross. I don't want to like I don't want that to sort of be the message of what I'm getting across. Baron Harkonnen goes past obese into uh like monstrosity territory. And it's not just it's a the what do they call it, the like the harness, right,
The
that like his
suspenders. They call it
anti-grav
suspenders.
his
Yeah.
suspenders,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
like the
anti-gravity. Yeah.
which is like this thing that like we see some of the soldiers using them, the Skurberberbers, the bad guy, like the really bad ones, the really deadly guys
Oh,
use
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The Sardaukar.
Sardaukar, thank you.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Dune. Like, there's no point in
They're
remembering any of this stuff.
Skirtaburbers.
The
Yep,
yeah,
yep,
this
yep, yep.
the Skittlebops, the
I love it.
whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
They use them as well, right? Like, and we see them, and it's like kind of terrifying because they just kind of
To jump down from their, like,
silently descend, right?
compartment.
And it's
Yep.
really cool
Yeah,
the way
yeah,
that
yeah.
they use it in the movie.
Yeah.
But he uses one as well, but not as like as like this deadly like ninja assassin tool, but as like I'm so rich I don't even have to walk, right?
Yeah.
Which like I love that component of it, and his physical appearance. It's not about it being like, oh, it's gross that he's fat, because I think that that would be like a very juvenile way to look at it. And I do think that previous incarnations have taken a little bit more of that tact with it. But I think that the way that Denis Villeneuve approached it is much more correct to the text, in the sense that like it's not even that he's obese. His flesh hangs off his body. right? In this way of
Yeah.
like
Very like
it's disused. He doesn't he
yeah.
doesn't he's not even responsible for his own locomotion
Yeah.
because he's so rich. He has so much money and he has like so much of this technology and and I love the eating scene because you just see this moment of like ecstasy as he's eating and he's just like, "Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good." And it's like and he's about to do evil stuff and he's like, "Oh man, the only thing I love more than eating delicious food is being a bad guy." And like and you just get that vibe and he's so like Stellan Skarsgård just sells it so hard and his physical appearance and like I said the way that like he had like the suspenders like they carry him around and like he kind of activates it and I like whenever he activates it he kind of like cracks his neck and there's like this sound of him turning it on before he floats, which is just such a cool attention to detail and a cool like performance that goes into it. And then he'll just and then he just moves and it's like his arms just kind of go limp by his sides and his toes are pointing straight down and the way that like when he comes across the table to
Oh yeah. Yeah.
get into Duke Leto's face. The way that like he's floating and he kind of just like at one point doesn't quite float enough and his foot kind of drags and then he kind of like knocks
Yeah.
something over and it's just like and he just pays no mind to it because it's like whatever man. I'm Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Like I do what I want and if I make a mess, someone cleans it up. Like I don't care because I don't have to because I'm just so rich because of the spice and it's just it tells so much of the story without like what you're saying is like the book tells you that and previous incarnations they tell you that like they go out of their way to be like like the Harkonnens they're disgusting and slovenly and you know like he just you know he takes what he wants and he's just such a gross creature but they never say any of that in this one. It's all just there on the screen and in the performance and in the design of the character. Um and I love it. I love it. And I like having Batista I cast as sort of the nephew and is
Rabin, yeah.
cast so perfectly in the like um because Batista is big in the like scary intimidating sense but he's
Mhm.
also and I think it's one of the reasons why he works for Drax as well he's also kind of soft and round, you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah,
got
yeah,
that
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
bulbous look to him and
Mhm.
as Drax it comes across as like oh that dude's just a mound of muscle like he's just bubble muscles on bubble muscles he looks like a comic book character and it's fantastic but in this role it's like he's like that he's like one of those like heavy set guys that is like but that's also that could also like lift you up and throw you through a wall, you know what I mean, like he just like the way that they dress him and and his costuming and everything just kind of gives him that same sort of vibe so that he matches tonally with the Baron of like you know like these guys like they have access to yeah, you see everybody out like the poor people, like the proletariat on Arrakis, and it's like they're all like wire thin and underfed, and the sun has you know sort of drained every sort of like every bit of their essence from them, and they just kind of survive. And it's like that juxtaposition of the people of Arrakis versus the Harkonnen visually and like even like the color of it of like the Harkonnen are all black and the like in black colors and stuff and the people of Arrakis are in I'm not talking about the Fremens, right, talking just like about the people in the city
Mhm.
are in like the beiges and whites and stuff like that um of like sort of that sort of desert color motif, right? It's just juxtaposing them in that way to just sort of show like the oppressor and the oppressed, and then you have the House Atreides come in, and it's like uh uh they're meant to be us, right? Like the average, not average person, but sort of like I think how the average person sort of wants to see themselves You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's like they're
Yeah,
much
yeah, yeah.
more
They're the
aspirational.
everyman. Yeah.
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 Because
Well,
they
yeah,
have to be because we're gonna see our hero in like as one of them, and we want to look at Duke Leto as like a heroic figure in a sort of way, even though he's part of this system. And it's like you want to get you want to understand why the Emperor is threatened by House Atreides, and it's not because they're good fighters. It's not because they have wealth or power. It's because of the influence of Duke
and
Leto, right?
that they're leaders, right? Like they're
Yeah,
natural leaders, and that
yeah,
people look to them for what was it? They look to them for guidance or whatever it is that he
hmm
says.
yeah.
But that's like really what you get the sense from them, that they're really powerful in that people want to follow them, which I think is, I don't know, the best deconstruction of that.
The more
Like
we talk
why
about this
are
movie, the
they
more I want
threatening?
to watch it again.
Right? I'm so
is
pleased that I
pretty
went to go
good.
see it a second
It's
time.
pretty good.
Like it's just, and here's the thing for me too, in terms of like a spoilerific thing that's like
Yeah.
related to the book, is that so Zendaya's character, Shani, you don't see until the very end of the movie. And that to me too, like I read the book knowing that there was a character that Zendaya played.
Hmm.
And as I'm reading the book, I'm like, it's none of these characters. Like I'm reading, and I'm reading, and you have to get like 400 pages in. I think it's like 450 pages or something before they meet the Fremens, and that's where she is. And it just
Yeah.
is such a weird thing to me that this main character in his life, because like he mentions her like a girl or whatever, is like she really is only in this latter half, and she's so integral to the story. But then as it got through part 2 and part 3, it sort of it time jumps. And so I'm really interested to see what they do in the second part. Man, I hope they get a second part. But I think it would be really interesting. I think that the reason why they cut it off where they did is I feel like they'll tell the story backwards. Like I think they'll start it with him older. Anyways, we'll see. It just doesn't make sense to tell it chronologically, because they did that in the book too. They time jump, and it
Yeah.
doesn't, because it makes way more sense to talk about it as it had happened rather than as it's happening. So we'll see. I'm interested to see how that happens.
So
But
because I haven't read the book, and it's been so long since
yeah,
I've watched the miniseries. So in the book,
yeah,
so at the point that we're at, we're basically like at
hmm
they're about to do the time jump in the book, or is that
yeah. So
how far ahead do they
this
go?
is basically they basically, the first chapter, the first part of the book is called Dune. The second part is called Maudib, and the third part is called The Prophet. Nope. Maybe it's The Prophet and then Maudib. I feel like it's Maudib is the second one, because he chooses his name, like that's what he calls himself, Paul Maudib.
Yeah.
And then the last one is The Prophet. And so it basically is when he's becoming a Fremen in the second book. And now I'm really in my head trying to be like, I think we do go on that journey with him. So the time jump is a little bit off, like a little down the line, because he still
Mhm.
has to go and be integrated into the Fremen society. And the second book is really a lot about Jessica and her integration, and and his sister and stuff like that. But they time jump. You never see his sister born in the book.
Mhm.
The mom is pregnant, and then the time jumps to 2 years later, and the sister is born. So like that, it's not like a huge time jump, but it's like enough that it's like a prophecy. Like I don't know, it's really good the way that they I don't know. Oh man. But the thing that's interesting for me is that I paid attention to the flashbacks the second time I watched it, because there was a couple things that I had missed. And one of them is the Javis character, so the guy that at the end that he kills. There's the first flashback, right, where or the first sort of future premonition thing that he sees Javis as this guy, and the thing that he's saying is like, I will guide you on this journey and all this. And I'm kind of like, wait, who's this guy? He's not in the book. Like there is no guy that sort of does that for him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exactly, no, it's so true. Him killing Javis does everything about his life
follows Paul as he is Maudib, like in the Fremen society. He is connected to Javis the whole way through, and that is such a beautiful way of showing that it really it is true. He does show him the way, but in that battle and in having to kill him. And then the second thing that I missed, and I'm sort of mad that I did, was the idea of you have to, like, Paul Atreides has to die, and if you and when you kill a man, you kill yourself. And that is something, like, I missed that sentence in the, like, sort of mysterious, like, voice thing that was going on in his head. And that, like, that really is, like, what they bring up to. And, like, sort of this movie, I know that I'm talking about it as if it's a piece of a movie, but when you really do look at it as his journey, like who he is, and when you look at it just as this sort of character driven narrative, Paul does start as this sort of kid that doesn't really understand what's happening, to making an active choice to become something else. And that is sort of quite brilliant and quite poignant. And there's a lot of I don't know, I think brilliance in how they were able to do that. There was multiple times where I remember looking over to you while we were watching the movie. I like going to movies with you. Mike and I don't go and watch a lot of movies and then talk about, like, we sort of like pick and choose the ones that we go to. So it's kind of nice. But I remember looking at you and being like, how long is this movie? Because I didn't know where they were going to end it. Like, I kept being like, what are they going to do? What's going to be the end point? And at one point I thought it was going to be in the tent, like when he freaks out at Jessica because he has the, like, visions or whatever. And that would have been a terrible place to end it this way. But it also, it was a shift like that in a movie that doesn't really have a climax. That is the climax if you look at the movie as a story of this boy and his journey, because that is that is the bat. He has this revelation and this understanding of the way forward, because he's surrounded by, like, he got a glimpse of this sort of future reality when he was first exposed to the spice, and then in the tent and surrounded by it and dealing with the death of his father and having to make a choice. Like, that really, even though he doesn't see the death, and even though some might think that that's not a climactic moment, like, that really is, that's the climax, that's the crux of the journey. And then he sort of shifts, and the way down, like, really literally, he comes out of that tent and sees the Maudib, the little mouse, right? And so that is sort of the moment that it becomes, something has to stop him from becoming that, like, himself. He has to stop himself, otherwise the path forward has already been chosen from, like, the moment he gets out of that tent and starts to head towards. So I don't know, and I'm just discovering this as I talk about it. This is why I love talking about stuff as we go, because I think it, like, really reshaping it and being like, it really is the story of this kid and figuring out if he's going to make this choice. He knows that this choice leads to violence. He knows that he's inciting holy war just in being who he is, and that's an active choice in when he decides to kill Javis rather than be killed. Like, he knows that he can't turn back now. I don't know. It's worth watching. I mean, hopefully you've seen it now if you're listening to this part of it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, if you're listening
but
to the spoiler part.
that was the brilliant part for me. And the part that I think that they did so well, and I don't know if you caught onto these nuances. Well, no, you probably did, again, because it's like the movie, the storytelling narrative was all there. But the Stilgar, and who's that? That's Javier Bardem, right? Who's just he's only in like 3 scenes, but he's so good in this movie. The whole cast is extraordinary. But his reaction, because his relationship to Paul in the second parts and third parts of the book is so important, right? Because he's this sort of leader, but he's a leader because Paul lets him be a leader, right? Like, it's sort of it like, as it evolves. And but you see that, like, when he's saying to Jessica, right, he's like, is he toying with him? Like, what's going on? Like, who is this kid? What's he doing? And she goes, Paul, he's never killed a man. And the look, like, when Stilgar looks back at Paul and looks back at this fight, there's just this amazing comprehension, like, he did such a good job of understanding the gravity of what was happening. And the thing that I'm interested in is that they haven't gotten to the part where they actually take his water, and that ceremony is important. Actually, no, I'm now realizing they're not going to time jump. They're definitely going to go it in chronological order, because there's like a whole it definitely is going to be about his relationship with the Fremen and him and Zendaya's character, and because that ceremony where they take his water, and it's really important, and it sort of is a shift in him crossing a threshold but also being who he is. And anyways, it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I feel like I've talked a lot now about about some random characters.
No, it's good.
So
It's good.
it should be.
I mean, I talked at excess. So one of the last things that I want to say, I want to make sure that we get into this episode on watching that Notes on a Scene, the Vanity Fair video that you sent me, that everybody should check out if you enjoyed the movie. Just go to the Vanity Fair YouTube channel; it'll be pretty high up on the recent stuff. It'll probably be featured, I would imagine, somewhere. But just look it up, Vanity Fair Dune, and I'm sure you'll find it. He's talking and he's talking and I love it. I love listening to great directors talk about their storytelling technique.
Yeah.
I love Notes on a Scene. I think it's one of the best things that gets posted on the internet. And sometimes, mileage varies depending on the director there. Cause then I immediately watched, cause it brought up the Andy Serkis Venom Notes on a Scene right after it. And I started watching it, and I made it about halfway through it before I was like, there's nothing of value in this. And it was such a great juxtaposition, because I watched Denis Villeneuve talk, and I love his movies, and I think the man's a genius. And sometimes he goes a little bit too far in places, and Dune is one of those examples. But he has every right, and I'm so glad that he did. And I love the way that he talks about it, and the way that he talks about, like, I made this movie for one person, and that was his 14-year-old self. Like, that if he could impress his 14-year-old self, that's success. And I love that. I said to you when the movie finished, I was like, the guts on this guy, like the absolute gumption to make the movie that he made, and to put that out and say, I made a blockbuster big budget movie, and this is what I did with that. Like, I made this slow, plotting, methodical, intentional film. And most people are not gonna like it. The majority of people are going to be like, I could have done without sitting through 2.5 hours of that. But the thing that I love the most about listening to him talk about it in this thing is just how much intention there is in every camera move, in every note that he gives the actors. Like this is the intention, this is what I want from this. There is nothing accidental in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Not a single thing in that film is there by accident. Are some of them serendipitous? I guarantee it, right? Like were there things that actors did that he probably didn't intend when they set out to film it? I guarantee it. He's working with some of the best actors in Hollywood. I mean, like, you've got, you mentioned it, Javier Bardem, you've got Oscar Isaac, you've got Josh Brolin, you've got, just like, the list goes on and on and on and on and on with these actors. So I guarantee that there were things that they showed up on set and that these actors brought to it that were collaboration with the sort of the direction that he'd given, and they found things that were even better, right? That's how that art form works. And I get tingles talking about it and thinking about it, because it's the thing that gets me excited about film. And like just this specific type of visual storytelling is that, like, it's greater than the sum of its parts. But that said, none of that stuff made it into the movie without him knowing exactly where it goes and exactly how to use it. And I mean, like, he gives props to his editor in the video. But at the end of the day, the director is responsible for the overall vision of the project. And like, they're the one who has to look at the whole and look at the individual components and go, I know exactly how much of that we need and exactly what we don't, right? And does this movie have a little bit, does it go into excess in certain places? Yes, there's probably 15 minutes of locked off shots of sand that don't really need to be in this movie in order for you to get across the point that Dune, like, Arrakis is beautiful, but it's also deadly. Okay, we get it, right? Like 20 minutes into being on the planet, we get it. We understand. It's been communicated, but we're going to keep getting it over and over and over again. But at the same time, it's like it's definitely a singular vision, and he definitely like achieved, I think, overall what he was going for. I love the humility of him talking about it, where he's like, it's like any movie, like you have it in your head and you go out to achieve certain things, and sometimes you do, in some places you do, and in some places you don't, and this movie is no exception. And then he finishes it off and he's like, but this scene, which is the arguably the most important scene in this movie, right, in Dune Part One, the scene that the whole story hinges on is the what is it, it's Jam Gabar, that's what it's called, right?
The
Yeah,
Gom Jabbar, yeah.
Gom Jabbar, sorry.
Mhm.
It's Dune. It's so hard to keep track of all this stuff. It's worse than
Yeah.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But
The only reason I know this is because I'm a visual learner and I read it.
yeah,
So when I
yeah,
read it and then I watch it, it
no,
sticks
it's good.
more in my brain.
Um, but yeah, like that is the scene that the whole movie, I think, turns on, because that's the, it's it is our first real indication that Paul is not Luke Skywalker. He's some mix of like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Like he's, I see Paul Atreides as much more Anakin than Luke. And
Oh,
other
yeah.
versions of the story, like I think that the David Lynch one definitely portrays him as more of a Luke Skywalker hero. And
But
even
okay, here-
the miniseries, the Frank Herbert one, definitely like puts him in like the hero's journey hero role. But like this one definitely positions him as more of like the Anakin Skywalker, Ben Solo. Like this could go very, very wrong. There's there's
I have a
there's a
thought
there's a danger here, right?
about what you're saying, and it's so perfect because I thought about it the second time I watched the movie. Everything that you're saying is correct, except he had two loving parents, one of which stays with him.
Yeah,
And I think that that makes a huge difference. Like just the scene where he's sitting in he comes into the court or whatever the planning room, the strategic planning,
yeah,
and for Gurney to say something that's like sort of a jab at him, but also like a you did something good, like to
yeah,
have that support in Gurney, and to have the love of Duncan Idaho, and to be trained in how he was, and then for his dad to come in and be so proud of him, and just that touch
yeah.
that like Oscar Isaac does is just so like
It
he grew
communicates
up
so
with
much. It's
parents
so
that
brilliant. Yeah,
loved him.
yeah,
It's just so
yeah,
brilliant. And
yeah,
that he knows, and he knows who his mom is, and that I think is that tent scene is like like his whole world shifting, where he's realizing that he lost something, and the thing he lost was both his parents. Like he
mm,
lost her as a mom as well, because she's a Bene Gesserit, right? Like
yeah,
when she's dealing with who he is and who he became, like it's just such a, and you get that when Leto had talked to her earlier, right? And the last thing that his dad says to him, because I was like, wait, is this the last scene that they have? It's when his dad like gets mad at him for him like going outside of the helicopter, right? Like
yeah,
the last thing is his dad like yelling at him,
yeah. Like
which
don't
I always
ever.
think that's
Yeah.
like a don't ever do that again, and him saying like of course I won't, like I won't, and it just I I don't know. I just think it's just really interesting. Sorry, you said something that made me think. Oh yeah, but what you're talking about, like the Anakin versus Luke, and you're like, there's that darkness, but there's also that like inherent light of the Atreides, right? That you
Mhm.
just that'll always bleed through in things. And we haven't talked much about it on this podcast, but Gurney and Idaho are so important in his journey and who Paul is. And I saw people commenting that like Duncan Idaho finally got his like due, because in the books it's not really like his death is so anticlimactic in the book, like a little bit, and for him to like that scene is so great. Like those are Sardaukar, and he holds his own, and not only that, but he also he saves them twice, right? Like
Yeah.
when that thing, like they can't get through the door, and he gets up and he fights them again. Like it's just so brilliant. It's so good. And again, they don't really talk, you don't see what happens to Gurney, but I mean, I don't remember seeing him die, so I hope that that's in line with the books, because Gurney, I mean, again, a spoiler for the book, but Gurney does come back in once he's the Maudib, like in like at the end of it. I think it's not till the Prophet. I don't think it's till book 3. Like so he has a long period of time where he's not there, but something that he does like encounter Gurney from afar, but he doesn't let Gurney know who he is, because Gurney's like, if word got out that Paul was part, like it wasn't time yet, so nobody could know that Paul was part of that. But what slowly happens is the Maudib start slowly fighting like Duncan Idaho and Gurney Halleck. And I think that that's really interesting, because he's teaching them all these things. And so when Gurney comes, everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is like, these are the fighting. This is like what we learned from you, even though we didn't learn from you. And I think
Mhm.
that there's just something beautiful in that, like what is the imprint of a man, and like a legacy. And I think that stays with all the things that make Paul who he is, in the way that like Anakin's story gets really messed up. I think that there's still love throughout the book Dune. And can I spoil the last thing of the book that I
This
don't
is
know if I
th-
want to, should
this
I
is my
not? This is
thing.
like,
This is my thing.
yeah,
Dune has been it's spoiling Dune is like spoiling the end of Return of the Jedi. Like
yeah,
it's you've probably already heard it at some point, or like the other part of it is like you've had your chance. Like you have absolutely had an opportunity to experience Dune in a variety of different ways, because there are also comic adaptations. There, like you
right.
could listen to an audiobook version of it. Like I think that there are Dune video games. I think that there were like CD-ROM Dune
I'm
video
sure.
games or something like that, like Myst style or whatever video game. Like
Somebody is saying something about how there's no like computer technology in Dune. People are like, it was written in the 60s.
yeah,
So it's like, but it's like, okay, so are you, but mostly I guess I'm asking for you, because you don't really remember. And it's not, I don't know how significant, I don't think it's significant. It's just like what's significant for me. And it has to do with the women relationships in the
no, the
movie and the
thing
book,
is
which is
that
why
like just like when we were sitting in the movie theater on Thursday, it was like the great thing for me is that I'm far enough away from having watched the miniseries, and also I was a teenager, so
yeah,
it's like a
yeah,
lot of it was lost on me, right? So as an
yeah,
adult, as a 36-year-old man, I get to re-experience Dune. So,
right.
but like also, it's not like no one story point is ever what's important to me. There are
Of
certain
course.
things,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
it's a Marvel movie or a Star Wars thing, it's like leave some of this stuff to me for me, because
yeah,
it's like I want to be surprised by Luke Skywalker at the end of Mando season 2,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like that's
So,
great, right? But this is an instance of like, no, I know the overall story of Dune. I know where this is going, right? So go
right.
ahead. Like if it's the end of the first
So,
book,
so
then
the
I
most
probably already know.
yes, the important scene that's not in the first book, but is in this movie because it's in the book at the
Mhm.
end of the book, is the scene where he's talking to Liet Kynes about taking on the emperor, and where he
Yeah.
says the emperor has no sons and his daughters have yet to marry. And that's so important, because in the book, the every chapter opens with a passage, like a literary passage by Princess Aurelian. And you don't know, like Princess Aurelian, you know that she's the emperor's daughter, but you don't
Yeah.
know, like you don't know who she is. But in basically the last bit of the book is him finally like basically approaching the emperor and being like, okay, um you're gonna let me marry your daughter. And the thing is, Princess Aurelian is quite literary, and so that's like a little dig at the end where he's like, I'm not marrying her because I want to marry her, or and I won't show her any love, but that's fine. She's got her books. But the thing for me is that like so heartbreaking. Like the last sentence of the book is like Shani and him had this like deep like relationship for like anyways, it like all this stuff, but Jessica was a concubine, right? Like she never married Leto because she knew that Leto needed to remain unwed for power purposes, right? And that was like a thing that was like an act of love, right?
Mhm.
Because she knew that she wasn't powerful enough for him. And so I'm choking up like talking about this. And that's a thing that like in the third book, like Chani constantly, like her and Jessica talk all the time, because Jessica knows that she's not the right choice for Paul as a leader, but there's nobody that he would ever love more than he loves her. And the last like page of the book is Jessica talking to Chani and being like, even though we're like not wives, people will always know that we're the ones that made dukes, or something like that. Like, it's something just about like the
Yeah.
power of these women that support this political game, but also like love the men that they're with. Anyways, it was really good. I'm like getting like, but it was like
Do
just like the
yeah.
accumulation of this, like that they're all playing this game, but they all really love Paul.
Yeah.
And that to me is such a, like, you can't, I'm really intrigued to read Dune Messiah, because with that much power, like, you know that something's going to go wrong, but how wrong can it go when you're surrounded by people that like love and trust you?
Yeah.
And I think that that's the most interesting thing to me about his story. And I
I
think
want
something that they capture really well in Dune.
I really want them
Yeah.
to keep making, like, I want Denis Villeneuve to like finish this story and like make the rest of it, like Dune Messiah as well.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how far down the line this will go, because they could go on forever, because there's a lot of Dune.
It just
But
should, it can end. It can end after, like, that is an ending. Like, I don't have to continue reading them, but they
yeah,
exist, and I'm kind of intrigued to see where their story goes. But it's a story in itself, like, it's closed. It's a
it's a
closed loop.
bit
Like, they tell his story.
it's a bit like John Carter. It is a bit like John
Yeah, yeah,
Carter, where
yeah,
like A
yeah.
Princess of
Yeah.
Mars is like a very self-contained story, as long as you don't read the last chapter. It's like you can finish the book and be like, oh, okay, good. Like, it is what it is. He ends up back on Earth or whatever. And then, but then if you keep going and it's like, oh, he gets back to Barsoom and whatever, you keep going with it. Like, the further down the road you get into like, oh, and then their son, and then eventually he dies, and then the son becomes the central character,
Just
but
like
then
the
there's all these
world.
other
Yeah.
characters, and it's like Dune eventually gets into the same sort of stuff where, like, you eventually start to like fall away from the cast that you knew into like another cast, and it keeps going like that.
It's almost like a sequel trilogy.
Well, um but yeah, I mean, like, I would love to see it, because it's like the Children of Dune miniseries, just like the first one, just like the Dune miniseries, as compared to this movie. It's like they do their best. It's a sci-fi miniseries. They do their best. They do what they can with the technology that they have, and they definitely
Yeah.
like tell the story, but there's a lot of stuff that you just can't do,
Yeah.
on a 1999 sci-fi miniseries budget. That, like, seeing the sandworms in the way that we see them in this first movie in part one, it's like, let's keep going, because I want to see how crazy it gets. Like, I want to see
Yeah.
how nuts. And I read a tweet while we were recording, because I was looking to see if there was any news today about Dune Part Two, and I just read a
Yeah,
tweet
yeah.
of, like, in an interview when Denis Villeneuve was asked to sort of like, what can you tell us about Part Two, and his response was, it's more cinematic. Which is like,
Love it.
what does that mean? Because part one is nothing but cinematic. It's like, part one, I'm like, hey, can we stop being cinematic and maybe just focus on a character for 5 minutes? It's very cinematic. It's
You know what would be
very
the absolute I'm waiting for them to just bust out part 2, like, "Surprise, we filmed it, here you go," and, like, drop it in January. That
yeah,
would be
no.
great.
That is
Like, are you
unfortunately
sure?
not the reality that we're living in, but
Eh,
yeah.
it could exist.
It would
It would be really nice.
be something else if they shadow dropped Dune Part 2 and we're like, "Hey, we already filmed this movie." The undertaking of making the first part was monumental, but somehow we managed to sneak in the second one.
Sneak it in. There you
Yeah.
go.
We just use computers to just approximate everything. It's just like 99% CG and there's like one scene. It's like the Rise of Skywalker where it's like, we filmed like 45 minutes of footage and then we just did CG stuff to like make them different scenes. Yeah.
Yep. Basically.
Yeah.
Basically.
Anyways,
This has
The
been a
Rise of
lot.
Skywalker sucks. Dune is very good. Dune is like the antithesis of that movie, where it's like The Rise of Skywalker was like J.J. Abrams being like, and Lucasfilm being like, oh my god, they really didn't like The Last Jedi, you guys. We gotta make a Star Wars that everybody likes. And what did they make? A Star Wars that nobody likes.
Yeah.
And then you've got Denis Villeneuve over here who's like, I'm gonna make the anti-Star Wars. And it's like, hey, you know all that stuff that we do to sci-fi movies in order to make them palatable nowadays? Like all of the stuff that, like, since Star Wars came out in 1977. That's like before that it was like we were making like 2001 A Space Odyssey, which is like long and slow and intentional and like very like thoughtful and esoteric is like sort of the word that I go to. And it's like, yeah, and we stopped making those kinds of movies because they were super boring and nobody liked them because George Lucas was like, yeah, but what about laser swords? And everybody was like, yes, please, more of that, less of the other thing. And so they started making movies like Star Wars. And then eventually they were like, you know, those Star Trek things? What if we made them more like Star Wars? And then everybody was like, yeah, let's do that. And so now nothing is like old sci-fi. And then Denis Villeneuve was like, I'm gonna like slowly open this door. I'm gonna make a rival, and it's gonna be like, hey, the aliens talk in weird circular ink blots. Cool, right? We'll have some other stuff in this movie in order to keep you entertained.
Like Arrival.
I love Arrival. It's a fantastic movie, right? And then he's like, hey, you guys like Blade Runner? What if I made an even longer, slower Blade Runner? And you're like, I don't know how I feel about that. And he's like, yeah, but it's Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford, and you don't know who she is, but Ana de Armas, and she's gonna be naked for parts of it, and you're like, okay, I'm here, I'm awake, man, because she's like, have you seen Blade Runner 2049?
No, I haven't.
There is a scene in that because she plays like a hologram, like a hologram wife for like lonely boys.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Yep.
Is like you buy a fake hologram wife who's an AI that like caters to your every need emotionally, right?
Got it.
And at one point in the movie you see like an advertisement for this product that is Ana de Armas, and she's like a 10-story tall naked holographic projection, and you're just like, that's something. That is definitely a thing that's in this movie. It wakes you up at that point in the movie, which you need, and you're like, okay, I'm here, I'm paying attention, and then it goes back into like weird metaphysical conversations about robots and people and souls and stuff. It's all very artfully done. It's tasteful, but it is definitely a moment of like, sci-fi doesn't do this anymore. Like sci-fi tends to be actually very, like when we think about Star Wars, it's very like antiseptic almost when it comes to sex, which is one of the things that like when I think of like 60s and 70s sci-fi, like it's hot. Like it gets like Planet of the Apes is a really
Earth Girls Are Easy.
Yeah,
well,
which is what that's a send up of, right? That's totally a send up of that era. But like Planet of the Apes, there's a character in Planet of the Apes that is literally just there as like a hey, and then there's a hot chick in a loincloth that we're just got like she's I mean like there's some other reasons why she's in it, but like for the most part it's like, yeah, well, you know, Charlton Heston's he has to ride off into the sunset with somebody. That's how movies work. And so like they just put this woman in it, and it's like all the humans are mute, so it's a whole thing. But if you haven't seen the original Planet of the Apes. But that's how sci-fi used to be back then. It was like, oh, yeah, like we're gonna tell a cool sci-fi story, and don't worry, we're gonna put a lot of really sexy stuff in this. And then at a certain point, like they just stopped doing that in sci-fi, and it became like, I think because sci-fi became like it took over for like fairy tales, and so it became like oh, it's got to be PG. Star Wars is PG, we got to be PG, right? We want to be Star
No.
Wars, so it's all got to
Yeah.
be PG. So they started, and it's like, but even Star Wars had it, right? Like Leia in Return of the Jedi, like it's a whole thing.
Yeah. He's wearing a bikini that is gold.
And we've
Really good.
totally lost that part of it. And and it was such a big deal in the Matrix Revolutions when there was a sex scene in the middle of the Matrix Revolutions. Remember, like we talked about
Right.
this,
Yeah.
like in the,
Yeah.
and hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna talk a lot about the Matrix in the lead up to the Matrix Resurrection, because that,
And probably before then as well, but also mostly then.
no, but I mean,
So-
like I have it in the schedule. We'll
Oh, good.
talk about it when we get closer to December, but we're gonna
Wow, we have a
watch.
schedule. We're so professional here at Thunderquick.
We're gonna watch the
Yeah.
3 movies, and
Okay.
I'm gonna let the audience know like when to watch Matrix Revolutions, and then
Nice.
what's the third one? No, what's the second one? Is the third one Revolution?
Reloaded.
Reloaded is the second one. Yeah.
One.
Reloaded,
Yeah.
and then Revolution. Yeah. But yeah, we're gonna watch them all up in the lead up to Resurrection. But it was so, like, everybody's like, ooh, it's so weird. And Fifth Element, people are like, oh, it's like, well, it's like this weird thing. It's like, no, that's what sci-fi was for a long time. Like, it was just perverted white guys writing sexy stories about space girls. And Denis Villeneuve was like, yeah, I'm gonna put that in Blade Runner 2049, but I'm gonna put it in there in like this really thought-provoking, artful, intelligent way, where you're like sort of asking questions about, objectification and the human body and sexual desire and all of these sorts
It's
of
like
things. It's fantastic. It's so good. It's so juicy. Blade Runner 2049 is a great movie. A sequel to a movie that should have never had a sequel that totally justifies why it exists, which is amazing. It's ridiculous. Like, as somebody who loves Blade Runner, I should hate Blade Runner 2049, because it's like, just leave it alone. Just let that movie exist on its own. And then they're like, no. There's a good reason to make this. I don't know where I was going with all of that. Denis Villeneuve is a genius, and
you're just going back to like that. It's a sci-fi. It's like classic sci-fi.
Yeah. He just like it's about the things that sci-fi is supposed to be about. It's like, I expressed it to somebody that it's like a Doctor Who episode, because the only context that this person would have had is Doctor Who. Like, it's really the only sci-fi context. And I was like, it's like Doctor Who if you removed all of the fun and adventure that the Doctor brings to that story. So it's like, like the Doctor shows up on a planet. He's like, oh, we can travel through time and space, and here we are on this planet, and let me explain to you in a 5-minute piece of exposition the political climate of this location and the setting that we're in, really. And it's like, imagine a 2.5-hour movie that took place in that location, and then the Doctor never shows up. It's just all that stuff that he talked about that he shoved into 5 minutes of exposition, and then something silly happened, and then they're like, it's a banana, and you're like, okay, whatever. And it's like, books, libraries, it's the greatest weapon of all, and you're like, I guess, whatever. It doesn't really make any sense. That's fine, Doctor. You're
Stop butchering Doctor Who quotes. It hurts my brain.
You're weird and quirky, and that's what makes you fun. But it's like, but the hard sci-fi part of it that was at the beginning, that was like, imagine a world where blah 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 blah, and it's like, no, don't, like, slow down. Don't imagine a world. Don't imagine it.
Here's the world.
Let me walk you through this step by step. Okay. you gotta travel
It's
through
good.
space, right? And in order to travel through space, you gotta get the stuff, and it comes from these things, and it's all. It's basically you get high in order
But
to know how
okay,
to
but
go
here's
through
the thing.
stars.
Okay, are we done or should I give another point?
Give
Because
another
I do
point.
have
Do it.
another point. Okay,
Do it.
about the spaceship scene
3-hour
because
episode. Who cares?
in the while we were watching the movie,
Yeah.
I remember looking over to you when they have the carry-all come down and pick up the machine, and it
Yeah.
like does its thing, it hooks on and it blows up, and I was like, oh man, the like spaceship. But you're like, yeah, they're spending a lot of time showing us this spaceship, but like you did it in a way where you're like, yeah, they're world building. But for me, I'm like, no, that's like a story. Like it's like I didn't know what a carry-all looked like in this world because I've only imagined it in my head. And so
Yeah.
for them to show how the carry-all worked and have it work successfully shows in the next scene when the carry-all doesn't work why it doesn't work. And that, remember how I was saying they changed like 3 things in the
Yeah.
in the movie from the book. And the one of them is gender swapping the Dr. Leah Kynes, which I think was amazing. What a great choice because there's so few women in this story to begin with. And she did such an amazing job. But the other thing is in the book, in that moment the carry-all just doesn't come. And so they have to go save the men on the spice crawler.
Mm.
But isn't it so much better for the story that it's that they inherited this broken equipment and that's part of like the ploy, and like isn't that just a better choice to have it that the carry-all breaks?
Yeah.
But you need to show the carry-all in all its glory to be able to show that it breaks. And so for me, everything is intentional in these long drawn out moments of storytelling because it serves a larger narrative. And so for me, I'm like, again, it's there's reasons for everything, and I just think that was really cool. But again, you don't necessarily need to see the carry-all, but I think it helps with the storytelling, so I was happy with it. So
Great.
that was my last point. Yeah,
it's really it's I don't know. I want more movies like this, and I'm happy that this is successful, and I hope that it finds some sort of mainstream audience. I don't have faith that it will, but I want it to.
We deserve Dune 2 because we didn't get John Carter 2. And let's just say that we need to make up for like some more sci-fi epics getting.
But here's the thing. Here's what I'll say to that. I'm actually kind of glad that we didn't get John Carter 2 at this point, because now we're almost far enough away from it that like maybe we could get a John Carter like this.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like somebody who like because I love John Carter. You guys, like everybody knows, we love that movie. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch it again because it's like it's just. First of all, it kind of hurts to watch it because it's like, we're never gonna get any more of this specific incarnation of the story. But it's also like after reading the books, the first 3 books, it's a little bit like, yeah, well, it is kind of a crappy version. Like it's and not it's it's a good movie, but in terms of an adaptation of the source material, it actually does a disservice to a bunch of the source material by trying to be exactly what I was saying, which is like a very PG, sanitized version of the story that Edgar Rice Burroughs was telling. And it completely misses the point on the idea of him. This is tricky territory. I'm going to allow myself this because I am of indigenous descent, but the term is going native, right? Because that's the allegory of it, is that like soldiers that were tasked with committing genocide.
A modern reference like Avatar, the movie Avatar, in which a white guy comes to a place and then becomes the better native than the natives.
Like, well, maybe that's a little bit of white savior nonsense, and that's why Avatar
white savior stuff.
But
it's very
upsetting. like that's actually what that story is about, and it's actually really important that he's a Confederate soldier for a lot of those reasons, because we're actually not supposed to like him at the beginning, and it's like there's a little bit of that in John Carter, but there's not enough of it, and it's not treated. it's really just not treated with sort of like the caution that it requires. It's sort of glossed over, and it's only there for people who know it's there, right? And for people who want to like
Yeah.
really carefully
Yeah.
watch that movie. Whereas like if you could do a version of that story, like if you did like an HBO miniseries of a Princess of Mars, and you had the nudity, and
Oh, that would be so good.
you dealt with the sensitive material and the actual content of the story, and you put it into the right context, and you had him like not drink a magic juice to learn the language, but like actually spent the time to learn it, like to watch him learn it and become a part of their society, only to rise to become the king of their society and then become the king of Mars. And like it just, yeah, they gloss over so much in it, and it's like I love it, and I love the stuff that we got in it, and I love the adventure of it, and I love the world. But there is it is no different than me looking at Frank Herbert's Dune, the miniseries, and going like, this is valid and exists. Like you said, like, should I watch it? And I was like, it is a sci-fi miniseries. So like, if you want to invest your time in a sci-fi miniseries from the late 90s, early 2000s, like, go for it, I guess. I wouldn't recommend it. You know, like I definitely enjoyed it at the time, but today, would I enjoy it that much? It's like, I don't know that I would.
You know what?
There's some neat stuff in there,
Girls Are
like
Easy. I watched Earth Girls Are Easy instead, and I think that it was the right
genius,
choice for me.
a timeless
It was
film
good.
for all
It
generations.
was. Come on, Jim Carrey is good looking in that movie.
He's a
And
he's a
that
hottie.
He
Yeah.
is a California boy. I don't know. It was unexpected, but Jeff Goldblum is always like
Jeff Goldblum is so hot that you couldn't even get
is
his name out.
you just can't. You can't even. I can't even say it.
Yeah, because you were
Just
salivating.
I
We
was
could hear
I'm
it.
so thirsty.
We could hear it.
What
What did I say last? What did I say on the last episode? That is from the era when he was at his absolute sexiest, and I think that most people became aware of him from Jurassic Park. And don't get me wrong, he's got the open shirt and he's all sexy with the leg splint and everything. It's there in Jurassic Park as well, but it's kind of hidden a little bit. Whereas in Earth Girls Are Easy, it's like he's got the blue fur, and then they shave that blue fur off, and he steps out, and the whole point of that shot
steps out of the
is like,
it's just
I Chihuahua.
It is
What a
so
hunk.
great.
Yeah.
He's so great. I will say that I like people like him from Jurassic Park, but I like him from Independence Day. When him and Will Smith are like walking through the desert with the like military.
Yeah,
gear
and
on
when he's got the
marching
undershirt
cars.
on earlier in the movie, and he's riding his bike and everything, and you're like, that's a good looking man. Yeah.
He's a good looking man.
He represents the Hebrew tribe very well. If only we were all like that, that good looking, but most of us more average. Anyways, we've tried to end this episode like 3 times now.
I know. We're actually done for real.
We're gonna stick the landing 100%. This time. Thank you guys for listening. It was a doozy. Hey, if you're in for another 40 minutes if you've got the uncut version, so buckle up for that. Maybe take a break, go get a glass of water, because
or you're probably listening on a portable device. You can also walk around and.
It's not lighter fare than this. That's the thing. Is that like, hey, guess what? We're about to get heavy. We recorded it first. That's it.
So
thank you guys for listening.
Jeff Goldblum.
Next week is an off the record episode. So that's you get that over on Patreon for $5. Or do the annual. Like, this is the thing, guys. Do the annual. That's the way I do it with the Patreons that I support. Is like, if they got the annual option where you can get a discount, just pay it all at once. Just get it over with, and then you don't have to think about it. And it's like $5 a month. What is 5 times 5 is 60, right? And then minus.
Make me do math on the spot. It's so upsetting.
I expect you to be better at that than I am.
I use Excel spreadsheets
Yeah, I guess so.
exclusively in my work.
Um,
I do that, but yes,
but then you get 10% off.
around there.
So take
There you
$6
go.
off of that. So you're paying $54 for the whole year.
You get like
Fantastic.
a month free.
It's such a great deal. Such a great
How
deal.
exciting.
Exactly.
Buy 11,
Thank
get
you
one
for
free.
listening.
That's
I don't know
we
what
should
I'm going to
call
talk
it.
about next week. I'll figure it out next week. It's close to Halloween. I guess it is our Halloween episode. So maybe I'll talk about some spooky
Well,
stuff.
technically, this is our Halloween episode because Halloween is this coming weekend, is it not? You'll be recording in November, dude. November.
Oh, dang. You're right.
Because November is coming up soon.
Oh, yeah. I record that on November 1st.
You guys got a spooky episode. You got a spooky episode a few episodes ago, so.
You did.
The last episode of
our
Thundercrack
last
was our
episode,
Halloween
2 weeks ago.
episode.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It'll be November 2nd.
Talk about the winter blues. Get excited about Eternals because that's gonna happen. That's happening next week, man. Eternals is out.
Oh
so
boy.
excited.
Yes. Cool.
Look at
Awesome.
this content
We can't do this.
coming at
We
us.
got to stop.
Okay.
We got to stop.
Okay. I'm good.
We're done. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Stay safe, everybody. Wash your hands and be kind to one another. We're done. That's it. No more podcasting.
Follow the Thunderquack Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by searching the Thunderquack Podcast. You can support us in 3 ways. First, by heading to the podcast service of your choice and leaving a rating and review. Second, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch from your favorite podcasts. And last but not least, by heading to patreon.com/thunderquack to kick in with your monthly pledge of support and get cool rewards like early access and extended episodes. The Thunderquack Podcast is the official podcast of thunderquack.com. Head to thunderquack.com to discover more great podcasts.